Yes, today I want to talk about the largest impact that blockchain and cryptocurrency is having is actually on financial services. Let me tell you a little bit about what we see that's happening. The actual banks, in terms of their planned investment, is not actually 33%, it's not 52%, but in 2018, it's actually 91%. And if you see what was happening last year in 2017, you'll also see that the actual production is going to be 14%. So when you talk about blockchain, when you talk about cryptocurrency, the actual implementation is happening in financial services. Financial services disruption and revolution is taking form in many different ways. It's no longer just about fancy apps. It's no longer just about robo-advisors and chatbots, but cryptocurrency and blockchain is having a profound impact. When you look at what's happening, one of the most important points is cost and efficiency. So the financial institutions today, they're looking for these benefits. They want to participate in the technology, but they want to have control. So what they're doing is mostly private blockchain. It can be in a consortium, or it can be in a private blockchain by themselves, but most of the actual implementation is on the private blockchain side for financial services. So let's look at the size right now. If you look at the size, the whole cryptocurrency market is probably just the same size as JP Morgan, and if you look at Ethereum, it's the size of Morgan Stanley. So it's still very small in its scope. And when you look at the actual production and actual skilled labor that's taking place, we took these numbers out of GitHub. So the largest actual production and programs that are taking place are in San Francisco and in London. In San Francisco, it's largely different applications and platforms related to blockchain, exchanges and wallets. In London, it's really about Ethereum. So identity management, smart contracts are some of the examples. And then in New York, largely projects related to financial services. And if you can imagine, Shanghai and Beijing is actually one of the largest markets, and they're looking at scalability of exchanges, and those are some of the most important elements of what they're doing. Although a lot of negative news about ICOs, in China, they have one of the largest implementation and developments in blockchain. So there are many hurdles. I think one of the biggest hurdles really is when you look at the scalability. There's really no proven scalability besides maybe some of the cryptocurrencies. So financial institutions are very worried about scalability. They want standards to be set up. They also want to be able to integrate it with legacy systems. You can imagine the banks, insurance companies, they all have a number of pre-existing systems. A lot of the financial institutions are worried, how does blockchain integrate with that? And of course, they're worried also about security. So there are some things that I'd like to go over, some trends that we see in blockchain. One of them we'll start with is financial inclusion. This is a $380 billion industry. Why is it important? It's because what we're trying to do here is to bring those who are not connected to the financial system into the financial system, and then accelerate their spending, and also close the small business credit gap, and combining that creates an opportunity in the emerging markets. This is important because we have in the emerging markets a number of interesting landscapes. One is they have a large mobile population, they don't really have access to banking, and a lot of the incumbents are actually leaving the landscape of banking. So it brings a very great opportunity for financial inclusion and blockchain. And what does blockchain offer? It offers the ability to not have a bank. It actually provides instant transactions, settlements. And then blockchain reduces this whole concept of the middleman. So in the financial inclusion area, where Asia seems to be one of the biggest, execution points, because China, India, Indonesia are some of the largest populations where we see financial inclusion be an important part of the landscape. Also, what we see is the payment industry. This is a $600 billion industry. This is an industry that we've seen grow dramatically because we have slow payments, large costs. It could be anywhere 2 to 7%, as high as 15%. So the payment industry is a ripe industry for it to be disrupted. And the problem is that we have settlement issues. We have cross-border issues. We have too many middlemen, so the costs are too high, especially overseas payment process. And the solution with blockchain is that it really does create this opportunity for eliminating that middleman, the instant settlement process. We see blockchain as a very promising element of payments, and we're already seeing a number of interesting solutions. So when we look at that, you'll see here in the back, we have a lot of crypto-based projects, peer-to-peer. We see that Ripple is very much involved. They've already created a global payments processing system where more than 75 banks are involved. So payments is a right place where we see blockchain for disruption. Also, where we see a tremendous amount of impact is in trade finance. It's a $1.6 trillion finance industry where we see a lot of middlemen, and there's an opportunity to disrupt here. In trade finance, we have many points where we see there's a lot of multiple platforms. We see a lot of different, problems where we see fraud, and the timeliness of execution is impacted because of all of these different platforms. So what blockchain allows for is transparency, traceability, and immutability. When we talk about real applications, this is one of the areas that we see that's happening today. So what we have already is a consortium called WeTrade, where 8 European banks have come together to create a permission-based trade finance system. It's already in operation today. This is a platform that is seamless. It actually allows for managing the whole platform end-to-end, and it's being implemented today through a number of different banks. And this is not something that we are talking about, but the actual execution is already happening in the second quarter. So what I see also a very important industry is asset management. For those who are familiar with this industry, it has changed dramatically irrespective of what's happening in blockchain. You've seen the sell side shrink dramatically. The buy side in the past has been known to be very slow with their execution. They've relied on the sell side, and they can no longer do that. But this is a fragmented industry. It's an industry that is heavily outsourced. There's multiple market players, so it's not that easy to disrupt. But there's a few elements that we see there's a lot of potential opportunity for blockchain to help. Which is, if you look at the overall landscape, there's a number of areas, but there's two things that I think is important to discuss. Is onboarding of customers, AML, KYC. That's been always a long, arduous process. Then you have managing portfolios. You currently have multiple systems, multiple databases, and the customer doesn't really get timely reports. So this is an area where we see a tremendous amount of impact for blockchain. So what blockchain will do is will allow a very seamless integration that allows for the customers to receive information very timely, and with one system allow for updating a portfolio simultaneously in multiple platforms. The other thing that we see that's happening is in the exchanges, a lot of people who are involved with cryptocurrency, token sales, all know that there's a number of elements involved with listing on exchanges. We see a lot more happening in decentralized exchanges because decentralized exchanges basically offer peer-to-peer transaction. If you want to sell Bitcoin and buy Ethereum, you can effectively do this peer-to-peer and exchange from wallet to wallet. It doesn't involve a central party. There's also, there's elimination of hacking. The only where you can hack is actually at the customer level. So what we see is a tremendous amount of impact that decentralized exchanges have, but this will take time because right now it's still pretty immature. We see that there's very little liquidity, and the advanced functionality that we see with a lot of the centralized exchanges don't really exist currently with decentralized exchanges. And finally, we have, can cryptocurrency become fiat currencies? We have 4 examples here. And in a very developed market like in Canada, we already see the central bank conducting white papers on this. We also see in smaller markets like Estonia, where they adopted an e-residency program. They have already created tokens, but not necessarily replacement of fiat. We actually see in Marshall Island where they've actually tried to replace their currency with cryptocurrency. And then finally, everybody is aware in Venezuela, because of the hyperinflation, we are seeing that they want to use cryptocurrency in economic stress situations to replace what they currently have. But again, that's still a token. So when you look at the landscape today, you don't really see major economies and major countries, but I believe this is a path for the future. You may see these kinds of announcements coming in the near future. So when you kind of look at it in totality, and you look at what's happening in financial services, I could say to you that the most transformative areas that blockchain will have and the actual execution will be done in the very near term in financial services. Also, what we see is that cost and efficiency will be the main driver of this, but I think for the most important area is that for blockchain to be successful, we have to find real pain points, not create problems so that we can solve. So I leave you with this overview of what's happening in financial services. I think this is a very promising area of execution for blockchain. Thank you so much for your time.